Okay. Again, I'm a registered licensed dietitian in the state of Illinois. I'm a certified specialist in obesity and weight management, and I'm also a certified wellness practitioner, which is another fancy name for a health coach. This is PremierU. There's offices in Swansea, Marion, and St. Louis. And objectives for today. We're going to talk about ways to understand the benefit of focusing on macronutrient balance to promote healthy weight loss. We're going to learn the importance of adequate energy intake that includes calories, healthy fat, and lean protein. I'm going to make you aware of the physical activity guidelines for Americans. We're going to be able to identify sources of fiber and lean protein, how to use those nutrients together to promote satiety and help with blood sugar control, and then basically understanding what those benefits are. So let's start with GLP-1 medications and exactly what these medications are and what they do. So a GLP-1 or glucagon-like peptide receptor agonist is typically used to treat diabetes when other forms of medication have not been able to successfully manage blood sugars. However, these medications have been found by the FDA to also support weight loss, along with a multitude of other benefits to improve kidney health, cardiovascular health, weight, blood sugar control. There's even starting to research on dementia and Alzheimer's disease with these medications. But some medications that are approved, such as semaglutide, which is a weekly injectable, or liraglutide, which is a daily injectable. The medications mimic the action of the hormone GLP-1. So this is a hormone that's released in the gut when we eat. It affects the areas of our brain that process hunger and satiety. So basically, when this hormone is released, it cues our body to tell us that we are satisfied and we no longer need to continue eating. It functions by improving glucose regulation, inhibiting appetite and food intake, and slowing gastric emptying. Macronutrients. Macronutrients are the main nutrients that give us the form of a calorie, which is how we measure energy in our bodies. These consist of carbohydrates, fat, and protein. The nutrients are considered essential, meaning your body either cannot make them or cannot make enough of them. And carbohydrates are our main energy source. Typically, about 50% of our daily intake should be coming from carbohydrates alone. The form of the calorie or energy is different between different macronutrients. So fat provides the highest amount of calorie per gram, and then protein is next, and then carbohydrates. So I know what we have listed here as carbohydrates and protein, both equaling about 4 calories per gram. Carbohydrates technically are a little bit lower at 3.4, but we usually round up to 4. The USDA recommends acceptable macronutrient distribution ranges for adults. So these are general guidelines on how much of your diet should be coming from each one of these macronutrient groups. So carbs, again, is primary. Between 45 and 65% of all of our calories should be coming from carbohydrates. Protein is between 10 and 35%, and then fat is between 20 and 35%. The guidelines also recommend that adults get at least 130 grams of carbohydrates per day. This helps with the brain functioning and making sure that the cells get enough glucose to function. Main functions of carbohydrates: instant energy. Glucose is the preferred energy source for your brain, central nervous system, and red blood cells. It's also used for storing energy. Glucose is then converted to glycogen in the muscles and the liver, which is stored for later use when you need energy. For example, after long periods of fasting, or in starvation. Fiber promotes regular and healthy digestion and bowel movements, which is also a form of a carbohydrate. It also promotes satiety. So fiber fills us up and keeps us feeling full longer. Carbohydrates can be complex or simple. Complex carbs are the most beneficial as they provide fiber, are less processed and refined, and take longer to digest. Therefore, they promote blood sugar and insulin balance. So it slows down the breakdown of carbohydrates, which slows down the release of insulin. So that entire balance between insulin and carbohydrate helps with blood sugar regulation. Simple carbohydrates are also refined versions. So these are processed versions of whole carbohydrates or the complex carbs. They're more processed. They often lose their nutritional value in this processing by primarily reducing the fiber content and then adding in sugar. They break down quickly and can increase blood glucose levels faster than complex carbohydrates. Here's a multitude of sources of carbohydrates that are considered complex. So think about things in their whole form, how they would naturally come from the ground, right? Because most of these are going to be grains. Carbohydrates are actually all grains, fruits, and dairy products, except for cheese. They also consist of starchy vegetables. So potatoes, corn, squash, legumes, which are beans, lentils, peas, all those are considered carbs. But complex ones, again, think of coming straight from the ground, whole form. So things like brown rice versus white rice, other whole grains such as quinoa, farro, barley, couscous, using whole grain or whole wheat breads versus white refined bread. Same thing with pasta, trying to do a whole wheat or even a legume-based pasta versus that white refined noodle. These are versions of complex carbs. And then we have the simple refined carbs. So this is sometimes where you hear the white food referring to usually processed carbohydrates. So white bread, white rice, white pasta, baked goods, candy, chips, crackers, fries, sugary cereals, basically anything that has something added to it or has been refined from its initial version. Fiber is the healthy component of a carbohydrate. There are different forms of fiber. There's soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. Let's start with soluble fiber. Soluble fiber slows down digestion. It helps our bad cholesterol or the LDL cholesterol levels. It helps reduce them. It helps stabilize blood sugar levels. Food sources of soluble fiber include things like Brussels sprouts, acorn squash, lima beans, broccoli, green beans, onions, turnips, okra, eggplant. And then we have insoluble fiber. This passes through the digestive tract unchanged. Sometimes you can hear this also mentioned as resistant carbohydrates because it's resistant to breaking down in the GI tract. That adds bulk to stool, which can prevent constipation and reduce our risk of colon cancer. Foods that have insoluble fiber in them are more of our wheats, whole grains, the couscous, the farro, the barley, wheat bran, and then vegetables. Ways that we can increase fiber in our diet. Leave the skin on your produce when you eat it. Most of the fiber is actually in the skin of the produce, not within the fleshy part of the fruit itself. Eating fruits such as pears and prunes, which are high in fiber. Prunes can be either ideally dried, right? Because it's basically a dehydrated or a dried plum is what a prune is. But trying to eat that in that form versus like prune juice. But prune juice, you're still going to get fiber from. You're just going to get a little bit more sugar. Beans is a great one. You can add beans to anything, soups, salads, casseroles, baked goods. There's plenty of baked good recipes out there like blueberry bean cake or black bean brownie. So you can always incorporate into even more of those kind of refined carbs, but make it a healthier version. Eating more whole grains such as whole wheat pasta and breads, oatmeal, barley, quinoa, farro, and couscous. Add flaxseed or chia seeds to things like oatmeal, yogurt, or salads. Flax and chia seeds are also a great anti-inflammatory food. All right, so in general, carbohydrates, we want to focus on consuming fiber that's in the complex carbs versus the simple refined carbs. Simple refined carbs don't need to be eliminated, but they should be kept in moderation and not consumed on a regular basis. Monitor portion sizes. The average portion size is a tennis ball or your fist. Complex carbs or fiber should be consistent in the diet and consumed with each meal or snack. Focus on the fiber from whole grains, fresh fruit or frozen fruit, fresh or frozen vegetables. Canned vegetables, canned fruit, or packaged fruit is not so much found in cans anymore, but in the plastic packages, that's just more refined. It's usually adding sugar or salt. So typically fresh or frozen. If you're getting straight frozen vegetables, not in a sauce, not in butter, completely fine. They're also going to last longer and are honestly the same price or cheaper than buying canned if there's a budget in mind. And then ideally, we want to aim for 25 to 35 grams of fiber daily. This kind of spans between female and male. Females need a little bit less, males need a little bit more, but on average, we want to aim around 30 grams. Now we're going to get into protein. Protein is composed of amino acids, which are the building blocks for life. They are a crucial nutrient that play a vital role in the structure, function, and regulation of the body's tissues and organs. Protein builds and repairs tissues, including muscle, bone, skin, and hair. It is involved in the production of enzymes, hormones, and other molecules that are essential for the various bodily functions. So remember how we talked about in the beginning, a GLP is actually a hormone that stimulates satiety or when we're satisfied from eating. So this is why protein is also additionally important because it's helping that hormone activate. Protein can be found in both animals and plants. Lean and anti-inflammatory forms of protein are recommended. So these include foods such as fish, okay? More fish that swims versus fish in a shell. Shellfish does not hold the same properties. So these are fish like salmon, tuna, mackerel, trout, halibut, herring, sardines. The only thing to keep in mind with fish, ideally it's recommended to have about 3 servings a week. So 12 ounces or 3 4-ounce servings. If you are female, especially of childbearing age or kiddos, are more susceptible to the methylmercury that can come back through fish. So just be mindful. That's why that restriction is kind of there for that 3 servings a week to help reduce the methylmercury levels. Men or women who are older than childbearing age are less susceptible to methylmercury contamination, but still just be mindful. Legumes, which include beans, lentils, and peas, nuts, seeds, and nut or seed butters, eggs, Greek yogurt, and then fortified plant-based milks. Plant-based forms of protein. So we're going back to the legumes, beans, lentils, peas, mushrooms, soy, tofu, tempeh, nuts and seeds or nut and seed butters. Be mindful of processed plant-based proteins, such as the Beyond Burger or Impossible or any of those sort of products. Monitor your ingredient list. If there's a bunch of ingredients on there and it's filling up half of the back of the label and you don't know what they are, probably not the best idea to be eating it. Limited ingredients when we're looking at food. So yes, those items are plant-based versus animal-based, which is good, but they're still really processed. So just keep them in moderation as well. And then lean forms of animal protein. So this would be white meat, poultry, just as chicken or turkey. Fish, venison, pork, loin cuts are leaner. Beef, again, loin cuts are leaner. Chuck, if you're going to do ground beef, try to stick to a 90-10 or below for fat content. Eggs, the whites are leaner than the yolks, and then milk, yogurt, and cheese. When it comes to dairy, there's always like, oh, I'll do skim or I'll do whole. Typically recommend just to stay mid. Skim is more processed, can add a little bit more sugar. Whole obviously is going to have a little bit more fat to it. So somewhere in the middle, it kind of finds the balance. And when we're talking about the inflammatory parts of proteins, so fish is anti-inflammatory. Poultry is neutral. Okay, the venison and the poultry sit neutral. They're not going to cause inflammation, nor are they going to be anti-inflammatory. And then red meat, such as beef and pork, is inflammatory. So ideally limiting that to about once a week. An average adult needs 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per kilogram of their body weight. This is adjusted based off of medical history, health status, and physical activity. So in general, if you stick to about 1 gram per kilo, that is a good range to start if you're unsure exactly where you should be. To calculate that, if we were calculating our weight in pounds, you would divide that by 2.2 to give us our weight in kilograms. We want to aim for lean protein at every meal and snack. 3 ounces is a serving. So this is similar to the palm of your hand, a deck of cards, or a computer mouse. So going back to kind of like the hand when we're monitoring portions, Just use your hand as a guide. So remember, fist is basically like a piece of fruit, potato, a scoop of something on a plate. If we're talking about protein, always compare it to your palm. Focus on trying to consume anti-inflammatory sources of protein more frequently. Okay, kind of like we talked about with the fish 3 times a week, the red meat once a week, and then ideally whole plant-based proteins are ideal. For nutritional balance, aim for fish 3 times a week, red meat no more than once. Fill in protein with poultry, eggs, and plant-based proteins. And then prepare food baked, broiled, grilled, or air fried. Try to limit fried in oil or butter or margarine or deep fried.
Hey, Megan.
Yes.
We did have a question about milk before we move on. What
Yes.
about using almond milk?
Is there a specific question to the almond milk or is it general?
The question in the chat is just what about using almond milk? I wonder when you were talking about being mid with the milk, kind of going in the middle. What are your thoughts of maybe drinking or using almond milk?
So
And if
almond
that
milk
person
can
who
be a
asked the
good
question wants to
substitution.
unmute themselves, they may.
What was that? I'm sorry.
And I said the person who asked that question, if they'd like to unmute themselves for more information, they may.
Okay. I'll give them a minute to see if they want to clarify. Otherwise, I can answer in general.
Oh, I was just asking about using almond milk. I use it in my smoothies.
Almond milk is fine. It's a good alternative to dairy, like if you're trying to do something plant-based, but not all plant-based sources of milk are equal. So almond milk is good if you want to keep the calories down, especially like an unsweetened version is going to be low calorie, low carb. There's only about 30 to 35 grams per cup, usually under 1 gram of carb, but there's also minimal protein. Good for calcium, but if you're trying to get protein up, I would not choose almond milk. If you want to do plant-based milks higher in protein, choose something like soy or pea are better options to get more protein. You are going to get a little bit more calories, but the protein is substantially higher. And then if you want something like kind of creamier, if you're looking for consistency, oat milk can be a good option. But oats, remember, are a grain. So they're not coming from that legume base like a pea or soy milk would come from. So they're going to have higher protein than almond, which is ironic because it's a nut, should be higher protein, but almond milk is pretty refined and stripped from its protein source. So oat is good if you want the creaminess. Honestly, I usually recommend a blend of all of them. So you're kind of getting the benefits of each plant-based option. There is a version of Silk brand milk. They used to have a Silk protein, which was cashew, almond, pea, but they've reformulated and now it's called like Silk Kids. That's probably the best one I found where you get a good blend, or the brand Califia has plant-based milk that's actually made from different forms of beans. I think there's mung beans in there and I can't remember the other beans in there right now, but I think it's more of a bean and pea blend. So it's also going to give you a little bit better nutrient profile across the board. So almond milk is good if you want to keep calories down and not worried about protein, or to keep calories and carbs down and not worrying about protein. But otherwise, if you want more protein, I would choose a different plant-based milk. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Megan, we had one more question. This is about protein. Is it true that eating protein with sugar helps your body process it?
Not necessarily with sugar, with carbohydrates. Okay. So remember, sugar is a form of carbohydrates when it's being metabolized, but we want to focus on the complex carbs where we're getting more fiber, less sugar. So yes, fiber and protein always together, fiber coming from complex carbs.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we're going to get into fat. Fats are broken down into fatty acids and glycerol. Some of the main functions of fats or lipids include cell membrane health. Lipids are an essential component of cell membranes and brain function. Fat stored around our body serves as a protective layer that can be used during periods when we consume inadequate calories. This is also something you may see as we're aging, how fat is stored and distributed in the body shifts. When we're younger, it tends to sit more on the outsides of our body. And as we age, it goes more kind of internally, more around the abdomen. So it's protecting our internal organs more as we're aging. Lipids help transport and promote the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins, such as vitamins E, A, K, and D. And it also insulates and protects our organs. There are different types of dietary fat. These include saturated fat, trans fats, unsaturated fats, which are broken down into mono and polyunsaturated fats. And then we have omega-3 fatty acids. Fat intake is necessary for the body to function, especially the brain. We need at a minimum 25 grams of fat a day. The focus on the intake of healthy or beneficial fat from omega fatty acids and unsaturated fat is key. Limit intake of saturated fat and trans fats. Ideally, daily fat intake should consist of about 30% split evenly. So 10% comes from monounsaturated, 10% comes from polyunsaturated, and 10% comes from saturated. Omega-3 fatty acids are essential. They play an important role in cellular function, heart and brain health, kidney function. They're good for our eyes, and overall like skin and hair health as well, and nails. These include sources are fish, primarily like salmon, tuna, sardines, mackerel, swordfish. Those are higher in our omega fatty acids. Nuts and seeds, so walnuts, almonds, hemp, pepitas, which are pumpkin seeds, flax or chia, avocados or avocado oil, and then olives or extra virgin olive oil. Note the cold or expeller pressed. Those are healthier versions of processing of oil. They're a little bit different on how you want the longevity of your oil to be, like if you're going to keep it for longer periods of time. Edamame, and then seaweed or algae. It is important to focus on fiber and lean protein with every meal and snack to promote satiety and blood glucose control. Remember, fiber comes from whole grains, legumes, fruits, and vegetables. Legumes is actually both fiber and protein, okay? And then choosing both soluble and insoluble forms of fiber for the best regulation. So that's the blend of fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. Lean proteins, fish, white meat, poultry, eggs, whites leaner than yolks, reduced fat dairy products, not fat-free, nuts or nut butters, legumes, and then mushrooms. Here's a few options for how to combine fiber and lean protein together, primarily for snacks. So like fruit can be good with nuts, nut butters, cheese, cottage cheese, or Swiss cheese is actually naturally a little bit leaner. Vegetables with peanut butter as well, like carrots and peanut butter, carrots and hummus, cut up cucumbers or bell peppers with hummus is good. Doing whole wheat bread with cheese or peanut butter or whole wheat cracker. There's oatmeal there with slivered almonds, plain popcorn. You can put nutritional yeast on there, which is vegans typically use it because it gives it a cheesy flavor, but it has a decent amount of protein to it. So sprinkling that on your popcorn can give you like mimic a cheese popcorn and give you a decent amount of protein. And then like a boiled egg with a piece of fruit. So there's a lot of options in there for how to combine your fiber and your protein. Here's some additional options for snacks. When we're talking about crackers, just really try to find ones with minimal ingredients. That's why I have Triscuits on here. Triscuits are 3 ingredients. It's whole wheat, a little bit of salt, and a little bit of oil. Ideally, this is what your plate should look like. Half of your plate should be non-starchy vegetables, a quarter of it your protein, and a quarter of it your grain or your starch. You want to aim for this for portion control. So if you feel like you tend to eat larger portions, a good way to help with this is to eat off of a salad or an appetizer plate versus a dinner plate. It will bring the entire portion down. You still balance it this way. The appeal to the eye stays the same because your plate is full, but overall you are consuming less. And now we're going to get into physical activity. Regular physical activity is beneficial for a multitude of health factors. It is one of the most important actions that people of all ages can take to improve their health. It fosters normal growth and development. It can make people feel better both mentally and physically by improving overall function, sleep, and mood. And regular physical activity can reduce the risk of a number of chronic diseases. Adults should move more and sit less. Any movement throughout the day is better than none. For substantial health benefits, doing activity at least at a moderate intensity for 150 plus minutes a week is ideal. If you do high intensity activity, you can do a little bit less at 75 to 150 minutes per week. So moderate intensity is heart rate typically between like 100 and 130. If you were having a conversation while working out, you would be short of breath, but you could still talk. High intensity is if you were, it would be very difficult for you to talk or speak while you were working out because you'd be focusing on your breathing. And the intensity can be combined. So this is something where like HIIT training comes in, so that high intensity interval training, because you can go really high for short periods of time and then drop it back down to almost like a moderate and then go back high. So you're kind of mixing the intensity. If you're doing moderate intensity activity, this can be broken down into 5 days a week for up to 30 to 60 minutes. If you're doing high intensity activity, you can do 3 days a week for 25 minutes or up to 5 days a week for 30 minutes. Preferably physical activity should be spread throughout the week and should be done in intervals that work best for your lifestyle. So again, this doesn't all have to be done at once. If you don't have 1 hour chunk of time at once to go knock out a workout, break it up into 4 15-minute sessions. You're still going to get the physical activity in. You're still going to see those benefits. Additional health benefits are gained by engaging in physical activity beyond the equivalent of 300 minutes per week at least moderate intensity. We always want to make sure that we're doing cardiovascular and strength training exercises. Strength training ideally 2 to 3 times a week, focusing on all major muscle groups. Adults with chronic conditions or symptoms should be under the care of a healthcare provider to minimize injury or harm from certain medical conditions. So if you're not currently in an exercise routine, or if you have any history of injury or cardiovascular disease, always a good idea to discuss with your provider first to make sure it's safe for you to start an exercise program. Strength training helps reduce the risk of losing lean muscle mass, which is critical to prevent illness, fatigue, chronic disease, deconditioning and debility, and malnutrition. It helps build lean muscle mass, which in turn increases your resting energy or your resting metabolic rate. So a resting energy or basal metabolic rate is the amount of energy that our body needs for the organs to function. Okay, so this is for our lungs to breathe, our heart to beat, all of those natural organs to function in their normal process. We have to have muscle mass there. One of the things too, if you are losing weight intentionally or unintentionally, the body, depending on how your nutrient intake is, can resort to burning protein before it burns fat. We do not want that to happen. We want to burn the fat. So it's optimal that you are doing some strength training exercises to maintain that lean muscle mass so you're able to burn the fat. Strength training exercises include multiple forms of exercise, including the use of resistance bands, cable machines, free weights, body weight, and functional circuit training. It's beneficial to understand the correct exercises for your body. Meeting with a personal trainer, certified fitness instructor, or a kinesiologist can help ensure you are doing strength training exercises safely to prevent energy and maximize muscle growth. Optimal nutrition and adequate energy intake are vital to ensure weight loss efforts are not sabotaged by undereating or overeating. So like I said before, we have a basal energy expenditure. So if you are trying to lose weight and you are restricting calories too heavily to where you're not able to meet that basal energy expenditure, you are likely not going to lose weight. Your body kind of puts itself into the starvation mode and it's going to start storing its energy so it can use it for your organs to function. You are not going to be able to successfully burn fat in that if you are not eating enough calories. Remember to aim for 25 grams or up to 35 of fiber a day, coming from whole grains, fruits, vegetables, and legumes. Focus on fiber and protein together every time you're eating. Remember, it helps you feel satisfied sooner and promotes blood glucose control. And you want to aim for 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. This helps also include those anti-inflammatory properties. Keep protein lean and anti-inflammatory. So remember, focus on plant-based proteins, fish, poultry sits neutral, trying to reduce inflammatory proteins like beef and pork. Consume at least 1 gram of protein per kilogram of your body weight. Remember that energy needs are specific to the individual. Personal recommendations by registered dietitian can help so you know exactly how much you should be getting in a day. And then consuming healthy fats coming from fish, nuts, seeds, and avocados. GLP-1s can assist with reducing visceral body fat, but can also increase the loss of lean muscle mass if you are not following a balanced diet or getting in regular physical activity, including the strength training. It's pertinent that the strength training is there to keep that lean muscle mass intact. Overall, if there's questions, concerns regarding your health or your weight loss goals, please reach out to your team at PremierU. We're here to provide support and offer the best care specialized for you. There's lots of options at PremierU. There's nutrition support, there's physical activity support. There's a plethora of providers. So if you need anything, just reach out. And have a good evening.
All right, we have some questions here. All right, let me go to the top. Let's see here. What about using a keto diet with these meds? Are patients successful?
A keto diet is very specific and it needs to be followed really by someone who's going to be able to guide you. To follow a keto diet to where its benefits are, it's not really a generalized diet. I'm sorry, I'm trying to exit the slideshow so you can see my face and
I can see your face.
With me. Can you see me? Or are you still seeing the show?
I can see you.
Okay. So keto diet, the benefit of the keto diet is to put your body into ketosis. Okay. So ketosis is when we are not using glucose as our energy. We start to burn from different macros, predominantly fat and then protein. But to follow a keto diet, to be able to have that benefit, you actually have to get sticks and urinate on them and check your urine to make sure your body's actually producing ketones. It's a lot of effort. And there's more research out that shows ketogenic diets are not that beneficial, especially for mainstream. They're good if you have epilepsy, they're good if you have certain forms of cancer, but in general, it's not the best diet to follow. Typically, if we're decreasing and substituting nutrients, we're replacing it with something else. So if we are decreasing carbs, we're typically replacing it with higher protein items. If we're not keeping that protein lean and it's fatty protein, your cholesterol and your triglyceride levels are going to go up. And now you have another problem. Plus, you're more likely to get constipated because you're not getting in that fiber that you need to help with bowel regularity. So in general, keto diets are good for very specific reasons and really need to be monitored by someone who can make sure that the balance of your nutrition is still there as a whole. It's never a bad idea to watch your carbs, right? So focusing on getting in those complex carbs, reducing those refined processed carbs, decreasing them as a whole, because in general, they're overconsumed, but we definitely need them in the diet. They are vital, just focusing on getting in the fiber from the complex ones.
All right, thank you. We have another question here, Megan. With these meds, I often forget to eat. Will this interfere with my results? Should I set a reminder? What is a good combo to have together?
That's true. So it is reducing our appetite. It is making us feel full sooner. We're not thinking about eating all the time, which, yes, is a good part of the medication, right? That's what it's supposed to be doing. But if you're not eating enough, it is completely sabotaging your weight loss goals. So yes, if you need to set alarms, put an alarm on your phone, put an alarm on the clock, tell Alexa to go off at a certain time. Those are all good options to remind yourself to eat. Keeping things on you so you're not out and about and then are kind of stranded because you don't have something on you and you know you don't want to go grab something quick or some sort of convenience food because it's not the healthiest option. So keeping food on you is a good option too. You can get containers of nuts. So actually like an Altoid tin or a mint tin is a great way to portion out nuts. So get a mint tin, throw in a bunch of unsalted mixed nuts, take that with you, take protein bars with you, take a banana with you. But yes, eating something. If you can't eat a full meal, that's valid. I understand, but making sure that you're eating something, at least a snack. Don't completely skip meals.
Okay. Next question. I've heard you should eat what is quote unquote in season for the area. Is this true?
So that's when we're coming back to, yes, like these whole plant-based foods, right? So yes, eating foods in season, the way they're naturally coming from the ground, minimal processing, minimal travel time is going from farm to table. Great. You also have to be mindful though, that in the Midwest, because of the weather, we don't necessarily get a lot of fresh seasonal produce during the winter. I mean, we can still get like root vegetables and some things. So do what you can for the most part. Yes, when things are in season, focus on those. When they're out of season, just try to get what you can. That's like the healthiest option. You don't want to not do it. You can always do a frozen version as well. But yes, ideally you want to eat in season and what is naturally there at that time.
Thank you. What about eating nut thins versus Triscuits?
Those are okay. Nut thins are okay. They're not so much, there's not as many ingredients in there, or even like a wheat thin, that would be okay too. You really just want to watch the ingredients on anything that's coming out of a package. Okay. It doesn't matter if it's a jar, a can, a box, whatever. Watch the ingredients. Ideally, if you can keep it to no more than 5 or 6 ingredients, that would be better. You want to avoid the list where it's very long and you definitely don't know what they're talking about with what's in there.
Okay, what other questions does the group have? We've asked the questions that are in the chat. We have a little bit more time. What questions would you like to ask for Meghann to answer during the time that we have together? I have a hard time eating meat. What tips do you have?
So in general, I think it depends on why you're having a hard time eating meat. Is it like a chewing or swallowing issue? Is it just that you don't have an appetite for meat? That can affect it a little bit. So if it is something that's chewing or swallowing related, just doing softer meats or making sure that meats are cut up finer, almost chopped or ground, that is an option. If it's more of like the taste of meat and you just don't want to do it, you need protein. You don't need meat. Okay. So this is when we go back to the plant-based proteins. So the nuts, the nut butters, the beans, lentils, peas, mushrooms, edamame, soy, tofu. Those are all good options if you can't or don't want to do meat. You just have to have protein.
Okay, next question. Are protein shakes a good or a bad choice?
I think it depends on what you're using them for. Okay. So protein shakes can be good if you're not able to get enough protein in your diet naturally. So remember, most of our nutrition should be coming from food. Food is our primary energy source. That should be the emphasis on where we're getting our nutrition from is food. However, if we're not able to get it from food, then yes, you could use a protein shake. Again, pay attention to the ingredients, minimal ingredients, better. There's different sources. So most of them are whey-based sources. So which is a derivative or a protein that comes from dairy or milk. So there's isolates or concentrates. You may tolerate them differently, but it doesn't really matter which one you're doing, concentrate or isolate. You're both going to get protein, or both are going to provide protein. Or if you're going to do a plant-based option, pea protein is going to have the highest amount of protein, or any sort of like legume or bean base. So just watch the ingredients in general. Try to avoid things that have, especially if you have any underlying kidney issues that have creatine in them, because that can affect the kidneys. But in general, just minimal ingredients, using them if needed, if you were unable to get the protein into your diet naturally.
Okay, thank you. I have a question here about, will we get a written version or copies of these slides? Because this is recorded, we will be sending this out. Also, the recording of this session, also her slides will be made available. So make sure that you're watching your email from PremierU. And so we'll be sending that out early next week. Any other questions? Okay, let's see. We have one more question here. Can you go into more detail about how protein activates the hormone that these medications mimic?
So anytime we're consuming food, right? So in the metabolic process, as we're breaking down, digesting food, our bodies have different enzymes and hormones that are cued to turn nutrients into different versions of themselves so we can use them for energy. So like carbohydrates break down into different forms of sugars. That sugar is either stored for later or it's used in the cells immediately, kind of like what we talked about at the very beginning, where it was like immediate release carbs and slower ones are used for storage, where typically it breaks down into glucose. Glucose is used in our cells for energy. It is stored as glycogen. It's the same thing with protein. Okay, so protein starts in the form that we eat it, consume it in from food, breaks down into a variety of amino acids. So amino acids are used in our body to create cells, build muscle, cue hormones, initiate that whole metabolic process. So that's where that's kind of going at. There's other hormones too that help with satiety and hunger. Okay. Leptin, ghrelin, insulin has a little bit of a role. Even our hormones like estrogen and progesterone and testosterone somewhat play a role in all of that. So everything with metabolism involves different forms of hormones with different cues that's telling our body what to do at any given time. Hopefully that answered that question. If not, just throw something else in the chat, or you can say something if you wanted me to say something different.
Okay. Any other questions? A few more minutes to wrap up. Okay. Well, we definitely want to thank you for joining us this evening, and thank you, Meghann, always for your expertise in this. You know, it is, as someone says on here, this is a lot of information, and that's why we offer this group, is because we know it's a lot, but we want to guide each person through their journey and provide this information. So as questions come up, as you receive this information, let's keep the conversation going. When you do your check-ins with your nurses, ask these questions. Keep the conversation going, learning, growing, because it is an important part. So Meghann, as I said at the beginning, is the registered dietitian at PremierU. If you would like to schedule an appointment with Meghann, you can go to our booking link on our website, or you can call our main number during office hours, and Karen Joe can also make that appointment as well. Well, we appreciate your time. Like I said, we'll be sending out this information early next week with recording and also the slides. And if there, I don't see any more questions for this evening, we will wrap it up.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Meghann.